Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in, and today I'll be talking to my good friend Dave Sadler of the Unknown Phenomena Investigation Association on the other side of truth. All right, so I'm here with Dave Sadler from the... Now, I always mix this up, Dave, so I have your website right in front of me so I don't screw it up. The Unknown Phenomena Investigation Association. I know when we were doing ghost cases in the show, I think I said the Unidentified Phenomena Investigation Association. So
it's got the same letters, so it doesn't really matter.
Exactly, the UPIA, wherever it goes. So you hate psychics. Why?
In the UK especially, we've got big boom industry via the paranormal industry. The TV programming that's happened in the UK over recent years has led to all and sundry people deciding they're psychics. If you go onto Facebook, for instance, and you put in medium, spiritualist, or psychic, you'll get thousands upon thousands of hits. And most of these people are downright liars. They just want to be part of the in crowd. Most of the other people are basically in it for money making. We all know about the Barnum tricks and such like, where people are able to read or come up with little tricks of the trade that they can read people, and most of them just haven't got a clue. Now, there is a small proportion, obviously, we can't say everything's not true. There are a small proportion, I mean, in particular for me, when my father passed away, my mum had a really, really bad time. She didn't cope very well. She went to counsellors and all sorts. They didn't help. In fact, they made things worse. My mum went to see a spiritualist. And oddly and bemusingly, and this is where I will give kudos to, the spiritualist actually helped. My mum became a different person overnight. She had a different outlook on life. So in that respect, some of these people are very, very helpful to people like my mum. Other people aren't. Other people take people in that situation and extort them for all sorts of money. And to me, that's sick. A couple of years ago now, I think it was 2 years ago, in the UK, I and a couple of other members of the UPIA, we set up a campaign where we had an official signatory list that was going to Downing Street in the UK, the government, to have a law where the mediums are controlled a little bit better. All they've got at the moment is they have to say these things are for entertainment purposes only. And let's face it, they're not, because they're still earning money, they're still giving people what they want to hear. People still don't think it's for entertainment, people still think it's real. But just by adding that little line at the bottom of the sentence to the website or in the newspaper where they're promoting or saying it at the start, it's just making things entirely more difficult and getting them away with murder. All they have to say is it's for entertainment.
Well, let me ask you a question about your mother's specific experience then. She went to see a spiritualist, or a medium, I suppose you could say, or a psychic, and you say she had a positive experience. She came out of it more at peace with your father's passing. Now, do you think the spiritualist actually had psychic powers, or do you think that the spiritualist was, in essence, a reasonably good therapist who helped your mother in that sense?
In my experience, and I've been to see lots of spiritualists and psychics and psychic churches, for the research, for the work that we do, I can't personally say these people are right, these people are wrong, if I don't try and see it from their side, go to the meetings, go to their readings, have readings done myself. And from everything I've seen, every person I've been to, not one person has given me an accurate piece of information related to me in any way, shape or form. But, as you said, with regard to my mum, I think that they've seen what's up. And I say, some of these people are nice people, genuinely nice people, and the person that she went to see was more of a counsellor than the counsellor was.
And so he or she, whoever it was, wound up giving your mother what your mother needed. So in essence, it's therapy, but it's not proof that there's actual psychic phenomena.
Again, I wouldn't suggest that it doesn't exist. That would be stupid of me to suggest that. One of the things that we do have at the UPIA and MAPIT, my colleague Steve Mirror at MAPIT runs a separate organisation called the Scientific Establishment of Parapsychology. And through the Scientific Establishment of Parapsychology, we have certain testing procedures which are taken from the likes of the Questler University and such like, and we're able to test people who claim to have different form of ESP powers, we'll call them powers, or abilities. And obviously in that range comes the psychics and mediums. Now, one psychic and medium will come forward and say, yeah, please test me. I'd like to see if this is true. I'd like to see, I'll be able to understand it myself. You don't get that. Nobody will step forward and take that plunge. So to me, again, that said, we've had people lined up who've dropped out at the last minute because they believe we're going to bandit everywhere that they're a bad person, that they can't have got mediumistic powers. It's nothing like that. It's a testing procedure to see if these people do have it. It's, private and confidential. If they don't want the details spread about, it's not spread about. It helps us as researchers understand more what that side of the subject's all about and how it works, if we can. But nobody will come forward for that testing procedure.
Is there any real difference then between these people who claim psychic spiritualist powers and, say, an evangelical minister or a Catholic priest or any religious figure? And I think we all know that religion is pretty fairly widespread and accepted in our society, who claims a direct experience with God, but yet could not prove it in any way, shape, or form. Is there any real difference then between these spiritualists on the one hand and any religious figure who claims to have some sort of direct link to God that they're channeling through to you?
Not being religious in any way, shape, or form, I have had experiences which I would scratch my head and think, is this related to religion? But in personally not being a religious person, I'd have to say that they were more or less exactly the same. But let's face it, both sets of people, even the church, are just money making. That's all they're doing. The mediums are money making. The evangelical priests and such like are earning money and profit. What's the Catholic Church doing? It's the most lucrative funded business in the world. So no, not at all. I don't think any of that. A religion basically is just a way of shepherding the sheep.
Yeah, I've always thought it was amusing that both the Mafia and the Catholic Church are located and headquartered in Italy. So you have one shaking down the secular world and you have the other one shaking down the non-secular world. And every Catholic I know is gonna leave a comment or something and say, and I'm tongue-in-cheek to a point when I say that. Do you think then that whether we're talking about religious journeys or faith or spiritualism or psychics, that if there is something to it, that it's a personal journey that you have to take, that you have to judge one way or another for yourself, and that you shouldn't be looking for somebody else to guide you? Would that be a fair assessment? Or do
you know what, Paul? Everything you say to me all the time, it puts words into sense that I've sort of thought about in the past, and that's a perfect example of what it is. Yeah, exactly. I couldn't disagree in any way, shape, or form.
If we're all on a personal journey then, how did Dave Sadler's journey start? Let's travel back in time a little, through the mists of time.
Through the mists of time. Can we take the TARDIS?
Yes, we can take the TARDIS, but only if it's the Peter Davison version.
Oh, I'll go for the Tom Baker version, but we'll jump in the TARDIS and we'll travel back. There's several things that probably come to mind from my youth. I've got a book in front of me. It's called Haunted Britain. I'm in my office, by the way, with hundreds of books around me. A Haunted Britain book by Anthony D. Hippersley Cove, which is a predated book from, I think it's the early 1970s. And this was my parents' book. My parents had this in the house. I used to sit in the bath and what have you, reading this book when I was exceptionally small. So that was always in my mind about the Haunted Britain thing. From that, my parents, whenever we went on holiday, we'd always have English holidays. We'd always be going round the manors, the country houses, the estates and such like, looking at them. And they were that's where my little bit of chain connected to history comes from, is doing all that. But then things, so, life goes on. And it was only until 1997 I was working at a job in the UK, and I was on a 4-on-6 off. And basically, when I was on my 6 off, everybody I know was at work. So I was sat around the house playing PlayStation all day. I'm getting fat from eating. things have changed. So from there, I thought, I need a hobby. I'm bored. So I thought, what do I like? What do I enjoy? I need something that's going to take me hours up that I can learn a little bit more about. And so I thought, well, I've always been interested in UFOs and such like, and crop circles, and ghosts have been an interest. I wonder if there's anything like that. So I looked locally, newspapers and what have you, and found a group in Ellesmere Port. In some ways, I could say it was a big mistake, because the early time of my involvement in the paranormal, some of the groups that I came into contact with are my favourite term, bomb pots, absolute bomb pots. Some of the things they said, some of the things that they did, some of the way they treated people, and I'm talking clients and witnesses and locations and such like, they actually need burning for what they've said and what they've done. And being privy to that, I learnt a lot quickly. I learnt a better way must be available to do things. So after several months of being involved in some of these groups in Cheshire, in England, I was pointed towards a course by a colleague of mine that he found on the internet, which Steve Mirror from Map It ran, called the British Investigators Training Course. So I contacted Steve and took the course, and the rest, as they say, from there is really history. I set up the UPIA in 1998, originally as the Map It Cheshire office. Had some ups and downs from there. For a while I merged the group with another group from the Wirral, which again was a bit of a mistake in some respects, because the UPIA lost its identity, but I learned far more in that period than at any other period throughout the years. And at the point that I'm at now, the UPIA, personally I feel, and this is probably can be taken as a biased view, but independently each person within the UPIA, I've never met a better bunch of people than how it is at the moment, who have so many abilities and can bring so much to the table. I mean, I know nothing about a lot of things, but individually each one of them people can bring something. I can rely on them absolutely 100%, and I can honestly say the UPIA, I can't think of any other organisation in the world who have as much talent, as much knowledge and as much ability as the UPIA have within the paranormal field and ufological field. I mean, since you came over 2 years ago to the UK for us to take part in ghost cases, a lot of people have gone and a lot of people have come from the UPIA, and now we're a settled team. There's 9 people, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think there's 9 people in the UPIA, but some of the things that we're doing, some of the experiments we're doing, some of the things that we've learned, it's quite outstanding really. And obviously since then we've started Phenomena magazine, we've run cases throughout the country, both TV work, radio work. So currently I'm in a position where I work too much, so I don't have as much time as I used to put into it, but I can rely on the rest of the group to take the group forward without me being so much involved, which is a bit of a downer because I want to be involved, but I know it's safe and in good hands.
I would agree. I found that when we were over there almost 2 years ago, which doesn't seem that long actually, it seems like I just sort of saw you, but working with you guys for those 4 episodes of Ghost Cases was fantastic. It was a great experience, especially you and Steve. And for the 2 that Paul Reeves was there, I remember before his father passed away, working with the 3 of you guys was great. Steve was fantastic. You're a goof, but so am I. So, we made a good team. Steve and Holly, more serious, so they made a good team. I remember that what was it, the hotel in Congleton, the Lion and Swan, where we split up, and Steve and Holly were upstairs with Paul Reeves, and you and I were downstairs. And if you look,
me and you were playing in the cellar, and they were being all serious upstairs.
I know, and Holly was saying, how does an EMF meter work and all this, and getting all this great technical stuff. And you and I were downstairs cracking wise about the painting. So I want to go back and update folks who've seen Ghost Cases, because I know a number of people who do listen to my humble little podcast are also people who've watched Ghost Cases. Shocklat Church, I've put that entire episode up. So folks, I'll provide the link. Folks can see that episode. It's one of only 2, I think, that I've put up in their entirety. And as we've talked before, we were on the Paracast last year and we talked about it. So I don't want to be repetitive, but I think, to me, that was the most interesting location I was at for the entire series. And I can't wait to come back and do it again without cameras. It'd be great if you and I and Steve and whomever could just go out and spend a day there. It's a wonderful location. But I want to ask you, again, about the time slip story that you told with the little girl. because you take the position that you're a skeptic. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Skeptic, yes.
Realist.
Realist is fair.
I'm not a skeptic. I hate that term. All the new age, I am a paranormal investigator to skeptic, so I'm keeping away from that one.
A healthy agnostic.
Yes, perfect, yes.
And yet you had a paranormal experience.
Be it paranormal or be it not, yes, we'll have to call it paranormal because it was out of the ordinary. So yes, we'll term it paranormal. And interestingly, Paul, 1 week tonight we will, as the UPIA back at the location. It's the first time we've actually been for a while. I've been going since 1997. It was I think it was the second location I ever visited. And in the Haunted Britain book, which I mentioned earlier, one of the local Cheshire sightings was of Shocklock, where the Brayton funeral cortege are alleged to have turned down the lane once a year. Now this, for listeners who don't know about the site, is a church which is in the absolute middle of nowhere, talking a good few miles from the local town. It's in the wilderness, it's on the Welsh border, it's completely dark, it's completely serene, it's an absolutely fantastic, beautiful place, which, whenever you go, whenever the UPIA have been, somebody has reported some peculiar event to take place, yourself and Holly included. Now the time slip was interesting. Nobody usually reports anything of consequence taking place in daylight. Not many people do in the paranormal genre in general report daylight paranormal events to take place. So this is one of the reasons I'm so gripped with the site. Myself and a former colleague and his daughter, who must have been about 7 or 8 at the time, decided to go for a nice afternoon out. Let's go to Shocklock, I said, as he'd never been there before. So off we drove. As we're driving along, we're talking August, you're talking summertime, it was red hot, and we had a thunderstorm, pelted down with rain. And as the people in the US, especially in Florida, know, they get it quite regularly. It pours down with rain, and because it's so warm, next minute everywhere's dry, and it was just like that. So we got to the site, I'd say about 15 minutes after the thunderstorm ended, and we walked onto through the Lover's Gate. We walked along the path outside the church. He started talking nonsensical, is the best way I could talk it. He was talking about things that had taken place in the past. Now this is a person, there's not many of them who scientifically within the subject, he's profoundly out there. When it comes to matters of spiritual kind, he usually ignores or has an explanation for. So when he started to babble, I took a bit of notice. So when we got to the rear of the church, so we could speak, we said to his daughter to go and run around the church a minute. So he just lit a cigarette. Now, people who smoke know how long it takes to get a certain amount down, ash down on the cigarette. The little girl ran to the rear of the church, completely in our view. As she passed around the corner, she immediately came round the adjacent corner that we can view. Now, we were looking on an angle, so you've got the whole 2 edges of a church to go round, and she went round one corner and immediately popped out the other side, and we both looked agog. I can't explain it. As far as I'm concerned, it was a completely profound event. We tried to replicate it. She done it again. We even tried it with a cigarette, and it took something like 1 minute and 30 seconds to run from, as a 6-7-year-old girl, to run from the edge that she left to the next edge where she came out to our view. As I say, you've got a whole 2 sides of the church and running around a few gravestones, so it's a bit higgledy-piggledy, a bit holes in the floor, rabbit holes in the floor, and it happened instantaneously. But when we timed it later on, it was 1 minute and 30 seconds. She said that she felt a bit cold around the back of it, but she didn't realise this had took place. We didn't tell her. I don't know if she knows now, to be honest, that we witnessed that. But it's also the same location. There's some video footage. I don't know if it's online. There's video footage taken where something, one night when we were there, and again, it's in the middle of nowhere, there was 5 people. We were all in direct view of each other, and something stepped from behind the church, a shadowy figure, and then stepped back out from view again. So this is a location that personally I've been to 100 times at least, where I absolutely love the place, where everybody who's been along have had some form of event, or they've been privy to somebody else having an event. The night where we went with Ghost Cases, Steve had an event take place where he saw somebody way back on the graves, and he went to check on that. He saw some light to the graves. Yourself and Dale had similar experiences, which when you discussed them later on were exactly the same. You and Holly had an experience where you heard a sound which has been reported on more than one occasion. And another event that took place was Holly telling me a report of something that took place, word for word exactly the same as at least 15 other people have given it. And I mean word for word. So it's a very peculiar sight.
Yeah, I remember seeing your reaction when, because we have it on video, when Holly, I don't know if it made the episode off the top of my head, but I think it did. And she described something to you, and just you turn around, I think to Steve Mera, who was there, and, you know, basically said, Steve, and then turned back to Holly and said, you have just told me word for word an experience that other people have reported here, separately and independently, so, you know, over a period of time. And she had no pre-existing knowledge.
No, I mean, that information, that doesn't even appear on the internet. That's obviously in my files. There's certain things in my files that I've not let people know. So when she says something that's already in my files and other people don't know because we haven't publicised it, put it into the public domain in any way, shape or form, then that becomes a little bit peculiar again.
So you're a realist. How do you explain that? How does that impact your view of the paranormal? Does it push you closer to being a believer? Or how do you maintain your realism? I would say skepticism, but your realism in that once you've had that kind of experience personally, but when you also know any number of people who are credible, and I would certainly say Holly's credible, and I can't speak for the rest of these people, who have something happen to them. How does that impact your worldview? How has that changed, Dave Sadler?
It's so difficult, Paul. I mean, you know, you hear these stories, you see the things that take place, you hear things that take place. It's just completely head-scratching. Again, I have to hold the agnostic view. I have to hold the information, put the information together, and test the environment, test the people to see if there's anything different than the norm to take place. We've got a few ideas of the site that we want to test a few theories on. But again, I've never known a location that has brought back so much viable information from different sources. It's so profound, it's untrue. Well, you know, if everybody could go and visit this site, I'm sure they'd understand a little bit better. We got 2 new members in the group, Simon and Louise, who went along themselves not long ago. And oddly, and I don't know if I've told you this, so this might be a surprise for you, the thing that you and Dale witnessed independently was witnessed by Simon as well, who didn't even know ghost cases had been made in the past. He'd not seen it. And he reported word for word the same as you and Dale reported up in the sky, oddly.
2 things that I take away from that. First of all, shame on you for not telling your members that this show exists. They should be writing local networks.
Oh, no. These are brand new members, and we just sent them out, go and do this. They know all about it now. They've seen some of the clips and the highlights and such like. But
we need a letter writing campaign to BBC 2 or 1 or whatever. Get us on television in the United Kingdom, because I need a new flat screen TV. So, but the second thing I take out of that, for folks who don't know, you can watch the episode and I'll link to it. But the experience, my co-producer Dale and I both at different times saw what I would only describe, Dale might describe it slightly differently, as a black void opening in the sky. So you're looking at the night sky, which is obviously dark, but there is some ambient light coming from towns miles and miles away across the Welsh border. So it's not pitch black. No place on the planet is pitch black. There's moonlight and that sort of thing. So within that, though, there was a spot that was pitch black. And it's not, you know, I'm a skeptic, or a realist, as you would say. I go through all the things like it could have been this or that, barn owls, who knows, flying around. Nope, this was stationary. It didn't move, it stayed. It was almost like it opened, hung around for a second or 2 or 3, probably about 3, and then it closed. And the only way I can describe it, you try and take a visual and put it into words that you can understand. It's interesting, I was talking to my good friend Greg Bishop 2 weeks ago. There's an episode, Nothing But Flowers, you can listen to it. And Greg and I were talking about language, how hard it is to take experience and filter it through the parameters of human language. and try and make it understood. And with that experience that I had, I still have trouble doing that, and I'm a smart guy. And the best I can come up with was it was an interdimensional portal. And I don't know if it was, but by saying that, I think everybody understands, they can visualize what I'm talking about. And so I would say, it's like a portal open to something. And if only it had spit out swimsuit models or something, that would have been cool. Miss Universe 2007 or something pops out. Hello.
Have to be Miss Universe.
Yes, quite. With my luck, it would be Cthulhu or something like that. That would be the end of ghost cases. So, okay, we've talked a bit about Shocklack. Now I'm going to switch gears completely, and I'm going to ask you a question, because when we set this interview up, when we were talking, I said, no holds barred. I want the real, let's feel free. This is not a PG-rated show, although language-wise it is. So what's happening now with UFO research, let's move from ghosts to UFOs, in the United Kingdom? And perhaps you can give us a state of the union of UFO research across the pond.
It's a good question. UFO research in the UK seemed to have gone completely downhill since the death of Graham Birdsall, who used to be the editor-in-chief of UFO magazine. And obviously now the paranormal taking its place, UFO seems to have gone down, and more paranormal. So people weren't interested as much in ufology. UFOlogy to me in the UK, I can see it in only one light. You've got three types of people. You've got UFO historians, you've got people who are trying to make money out of the subject, and you've got nuts and bolts researchers who will take a case and they will research the case, they will look at the information available, they will make the contacts in the necessary domains, they will find out as much information as they possibly can, and they will get back to the client with an answer as what it is likely to be. You've got the historians, people who are far more interested in Rendlesham Forest incident, Berwyn Mountain UFO crash. These are obviously some people in the US, Canada and such like won't know of these. Please Google them and you'll find out a little bit more. These are the main things that have taken place in the ufological world in the UK over the years.
I think Rendlesham Forest is probably pretty well known even outside the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. Anyone who's seen my film would know it. It's number 3 on the top 10 list of UFO cases. But Berwyn Forest, I'm sure, is not. So we'll come back. I wanted to talk to you about Berwyn Forest, so we'll come back to that.
Berwyn Mountain.
Berwyn Mountain. Sorry, right. I'm mixing forest and mountain. But so remind me to come back to Berwyn Mountain. Certainly. Drill down more deeply into that particular case. But continue on with your discussion.
Certainly, yeah. The UK Isles are significantly smaller than the US. So when things are taking place in the UK, they seem to be a lot more precise. We don't have the big UFO craze that America has as bad. We do have the UFO nutcases and such like, but it's on a less grandeur scale than in the US. So the UFO historians are there. They'll quote this, quote that, quote the other. They'll talk all the you're wrong. They'll argue all day. That's where the political thing is. And then you've got people who, and I'm going to name names. I've not met the man. I've not met him personally. You've got the highest respect for him as a person, Nick Pope. Nick Pope, to me, is destroying the world of ufology away from what everybody else sees. The public eye sees the daily newspapers, the red tops, as we call them in England, the Sun, the Mirror, etc., etc. Nick always appears in the Sun, and everything that appears in there, every UFO photograph which has been taken on an iPhone and edited, every UFO report, Nick always says, word for word, this is possibly the best evidence of UFOs contact the world has ever seen, every time. A couple of years ago, there's a place in Lincoln that had a big wind farm, and one of the turbines, as an engineer, because I'm an aircraft engineer, I know how things work. Over a period of time, one of the arms of the turbines came off. It hit another one. It caused a lot of damage, ended up on the floor. Nick Pope was going around telling everyone it was a UFO come down and struck the wind farm. To me, this is absolutely absurd, because if he is the lead figure of British ufology, as most people do see him, worldwide, Nick Pope, you all know him in America, you all know him in Canada, you know him personally over in Canada. This, to me, is just absurd. How can you be preaching this tripe when people are there wanting... People are there to learn. People are there with their minds open. And when you're filling them with crap, they're going to take it the wrong way and start preaching the crap themselves. They're not going to do things properly. They're not going to listen to things properly. We've got it at the moment, Paul, this whole 2012 and the truth is on what it's just the same as Nick Pope, what he's doing. People preaching crap and other people believing it so much that they're giving all the worldly properties away. We've seen it just last week. UFO footage come out, the Jerusalem UFO footage. Nick Pope and everyone jumping on the bandwagon. This is the greatest UFO evidence ever. A week later, we find it's also exactly the same as the footage for Battle Los Angeles. A new film, a new blockbuster film coming out with UFO activity in it. Exactly the same. Basically, it's an ad campaign that they've run. They've put it into the public domain. Everybody who's jumped on it, oh, yeah. And now must be feeling a bit of shame that it's just an advertising campaign by, they'll be like, oh, yeah, we knew, we were just joking. But with all due respect, it's complete and utter. How do you say that word without swearing? Plop.
There you go, plop. I think
Plop.
Everybody knows what we mean. Well, in defense of Nick, and he's not here, obviously, and you and I were talking before we began, a couple of years ago, I did a list of what I consider to be the top 10 young UFO researchers who would have a profound impact on serious UFO research for the next 10 to 20 years or so. And by young, I meant basically anyone under 45, because as compared to the Stan Friedmans of the world who were in their 60s and 70s, 45 is still young. So Nick Redfern was on that list, a prolific researcher. Whether you agree or disagree, the man digs through archives, and he writes books. And Nick Pope was number one on that list. And from my point of view, one of the things that UFO research has missed over the years is the need, if you want it to be taken seriously, is the need to have somebody as a spokesperson who is articulate, media savvy, especially in the new media, the social networking era that we're in, and who can get the message out, which is that there is a mystery here that is worthy of serious scientific consideration. I thought Nick Pope was that guy. I still think Nick Pope could be that guy, but, and I think I've told Nick this in person, so probably comes as no surprise, same problem I have with Stan Friedman over the years, a man for whom I have a tremendous amount of affection because I'm related to him, but also I have a great deal of respect for him. And yet, for all the good that people like Stan and Nick and others do who have that public profile, that they stimulate interest in the subject, legitimately too, I think. There they were in Saudi Arabia, both of them, Stan and Nick, on a panel with Jacques Vallée and Michio Kaku. So that's a pretty good group of people talking about, at a conference, about UFOs and the UFO phenomenon. The problem comes with the people that they associate with. And they try and have it both ways. They try and be serious, and if you're sitting on a panel with Michio Kaku, your serious quotient just went up. But then you go to a conference where you're sitting next to exopolitics guys who think that 150 alien races are already interacting with us. So you're not very discriminating. Mm-hmm. And I think you need to be. To me, that's the biggest problem. And I would tell Nick that to his face. I've told Stan that to his face. And I've said it publicly, too, that, you can't have it both ways. You kind of have to be one or the other if you want to be taken seriously.
Don't get me wrong, Paul. I've got a lot of respect for Nick Pope. Obviously, he is in the public eye. He does have a way that he has to deal with things, but the problem I've got are the things that he's saying are the things that he shouldn't be saying, and he knows he shouldn't be saying these things. I would love to meet Nick Pope. I would love to have a pint with him, shake his hand, because me and Nick Pope, I said something publicly about him a couple of years ago, and he wasn't very happy with what I'd said. I apologised profusely. I was out of order saying it at the time. I'll stick by my guns and say I meant it. I'm never going back and said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I apologise for saying it publicly. I would like to sit next to Nick. I'd like to have a chat. I'd like to Nick to go him a little bit better. Who wouldn't? But there's people, not just like Nick Pope, there's people throughout the UK who are just making money. I got a prime example this week. You've been contacted by a lady who is reporting certain alien abduction type things taking place. She's also contacted Nick Pope. She's also contacted several others of the lead figures of British ufology, and I'm doing the quote thing again, people who are making the money, the people who are on the lecture circuit, the people who are writing the books. Every one of them has ignored her to the point that they haven't even replied and said, sorry, I can't do anything about it. And with respect, Paul, you are the only person who said, why don't you get in contact with these guys? She's had no other help in any way, shape or form than you, obviously, not being able to help and not being a full-time UFO researcher and such like over in Canada to send her back to ourselves, which, got to be thankful for, thank you very much. But why did not one of the other people help her in any way, shape or form? Is it because her story wouldn't make them money? Or because they'd have to do a little bit too much? Or because, if it is, and we don't know yet, something psychological, is it because they can't deal with a psychological aspect of a witness? They don't know how to deal with it in any way, shape or form, where we've got the ability to deal with such things.
Yeah, I got contacted by her, and we won't say her name, through Facebook. And I take unless you're a porn star, and every now and then somebody who's just flogging nude photos or something sends you a Facebook invite. I'll accept any Facebook invitation. It's how you build a social network, meet a lot of interesting people. And so she sent me an invitation, and then she sent me a note saying, look, I've had what I think are these experiences. Could you help me, or do you know anybody who could? And I said, well, no, I can't, for a lot of reasons. So I said, look, you're in the United Kingdom. I think she's in Scotland, actually. So I've lived there. I know how far away, it's not like you're right next door. But I said, who in the United Kingdom do I know that I trust to send this person to? And I told her flat out, I said, look, if you're lying, I'm not sure I phrased it that way, but if you're lying, or if this is something else, they will give you the straight scoop, these guys. They will give you a skeptical, word I use, you'd call it realistic, opinion. They will do real research. If they're interested, these are people who might be able to help you. And if they can't help you, they're honest enough to tell you that and send you to somebody they think can help you. And so I sent her to you guys, and that's cool. I didn't know that she had actually contacted you.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you send them on their way to people you think that might be able to help them, and they never follow through for whatever reason. So she did contact. Well, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's being dealt. It's not being dealt with by me because obviously time I've got available. The person best suited to the case anyway, because of some of the things she was saying, like the shadow people, was Steve Mary, because he's been doing a lot of research regarding the shadow people for the last few years. So it's a perfect case for Steve. So Steve's, hopefully they're in liaisons at the moment regarding what's what. Anybody with any report who comes to you, you've got to take them at the value that it is originally. You've got to reply. If you don't reply to these people, it might be a serious medical issue. It might be a psychological issue. If you don't try and help that person in how many ways you can, that's not the human nature, is it? You have to help these people. It might not be paranormal. You still have to help. I'm
not an investigator. I can do certain types of investigation. I'm a trained historian. I've done archival work and stuff. I don't have the time or the inclination. I have a real life and a real career and a real job and all that stuff. And I know where my areas of expertise are. But the one thing I can do, and I've been criticized recently for being a UFO celebrity, whatever the heck that means. But if I have a public profile, and I do, people tend to seek me out. And if nothing else, I can be the go-between. The person who says, look, on one hand, you're somebody who's had an experience. On the other hand, I'm a guy who knows a lot of guys who are serious researchers. Why don't I put you in touch with them and see what happens? And that's a pretty easy thing to do. If somebody contacts you, it took, I think, all of 10 minutes out of my life to compose a reply to her, send her on her way to you, and, bada bing, bada boom. If you can't even be bothered to do that, that's not a good sign.
We'll help as much as we can. Obviously, it's a difficult scenario. She is up in Scotland, which I know it's not as far as some places in America are, but from where we are to Scotland, it's a good 8-hour trip. There's probably not going to be a face-to-face thing going on. We will be able to do things a little bit better, and hopefully, even if it's nothing more than, we've got all the different report forms and such like, which will point towards different things that it might be. We might find that she maybe just want an ear. She maybe want to get something off her chest. That's all. We don't know. We don't know what the full concept of it is yet. But we'll help as much as we possibly can, without a doubt.
When you put yourself out there, I was in a bar a couple of weeks ago, and these two ladies came over. Probably
man.
No, they're probably in their 50s, and their husbands or whatever were playing pool. So on a whole I skew downwards, Dave, when I'm looking for women, age-wise, not upwards. So it's because I'm a celebrity, I have to do things like that. And they had seen the show Ghost Cases, and they wanted to talk.
They were asking for my number.
Yes, well, actually, they were asking for Steve's number, but anyway. And they had this. They said they had this experience themselves, and so there I am. Now I'll give you the good news and the bad news. Here's the bad news. I'm in a bar. I've already had about 4 drinks, so I'm not drunk, but I'm not sober either. I'm there with a friend. Frankly, you know what? I don't want to talk to these ladies. Nothing personal. They were very nice. It's just, this is my time, my space. I don't want to talk to you. And yet, I talked to them for half an hour. I didn't give them any answers. I said, look, here's some of the things that maybe it could be. Here's some of my own experiences. They just wanted to talk. And from my point of view, if you're going to be in the public eye, whether it's a television personality, which is what I was, or an investigator who maintains a public profile like you do, you have a website, contact forms and stuff, if people are going to come up to you, you have an obligation to at least listen to them. Until the point where they become obnoxious or rude or whatever, and then you can send them on their way. But if they're polite, respectful, you have an obligation, I think, at all times, if you're going to put yourself out in the public eye, to be responsive to that kind of stuff. At the very least, say, look, I can't talk right now. Here's my business card or my website. I promise you, if you contact me, I will respond.
Yeah.
And I learned that both from Stan Friedman, obviously, but a guy named Don Ledger, who was one of the 2 original researchers of the Shag Harbor case here. And I was out for having lunch with Don once several years ago, and a guy recognized him, walked up, and said, look, can I tell you basically my UFO story? And Don and I, you could tell Don in one sense didn't want to talk to the guy because we're having a private lunch. And he kind of looked over to me, and I just nodded and, smiled, and it was like, yeah, have a seat. And he spent about 20 minutes telling Don his story. And Don took down his details and said he'd contact him later. And I don't know if he ever did. But I think you have to do that. And I think when somebody emails you or Facebooks you or whatever, you have an obligation to respond if you're going to be in the public eye. And if you won't do that, then hire an assistant to do it or something. I have no idea. But
I always respond. I mean, my only problem is sometimes it'll take me a week or 2 to get back to an email because obviously with work commitments and what have you.
Sure.
I'm up at silly o'clock in the morning, so I'll either check my emails on my phone in work and forward them to somebody who can deal with it, Phil Boardley, Kirsten Raven, or obviously Steve Mera, or I will, if it's not as important, if it's somebody just asking if they want to submit an article to Phenomena magazine or ask how to get hold of it, I'll leave it a couple of days till the weekend, and then first thing Saturday morning, I'm usually up before everybody else, so I'll be straight down on the computer doing everything I need to do before the day begins.
Yeah, and I think people will understand that if they're reasonable and if they have a legitimate thing. If they're cuckoos, and we do get, I'm sure you can agree with me, a lot of cuckoos who call you up or email you or whatever, they're the ones that won't wait, and they can get a little nasty, and then you can ignore them. But if people are respectful and reasonable, yeah, why not? And out of it can come some really interesting stories, at least in my experience.
Definitely.
So you were slagging Nick Pope, though. Continue on your UFO tour through the United Kingdom. Tell me a bit about Dave Clark and Andy Roberts, who over here a lot of people view them as arch skeptics. I have a high degree of regard, I've never met him, for Clark's work, his research, his books. And I've never met Andy Roberts either, but I have a high regard for his twisted sense of humor. So tell me a bit about those 2 guys and anybody else in the UK that maybe we don't know as much about over here.
Certainly. Andy Roberts, I cannot help but like him. He's just not, I always thought that Andy Roberts was a lot taller than he is. That's the first thing I could say. The only time I've met Andy Roberts in the flesh, we were at a Peter Hook gig, who's the former bassist of New Order and Joy Division. It was an evening with Peter Hook where I met up with Andy Roberts in Manchester last year, and Andy Roberts is a thoroughly nice bloke. I find him quite hilarious. I've got enough plaudits for Andy Roberts, and the work he does is brilliant. We mentioned earlier about the Berwyn Mountain UFO crash. Andy's just sent me a copy of his book, UFO Down, the Berwyn Mountain UFO crash, all about the case. not so much the skepticism, but again the realism behind it, because it's another classic case scenario where the bomb pots are jumping on a case, giving it the big, oh, it's a UFO, when it probably wasn't. But Andy Roberts is brilliant. I can honestly not give enough plaudits for his work. Dave Clarke obviously works alongside Andy Roberts. Again, a lot of respect for most of Dave Clarke's work, but we have come across some things that I will scratch my head over. I'm not going to go into depth about them, but some of his work in the past where he was a news reporter for a newspaper seemed to have started certain trends and patterns in paranormal cases in a certain area of the UK. And I can't say that for definite or for sure, but what the information we've found would suggest that to be the case. That was a long time ago, but again, from the work that David Clarke does now, again, kudos to him, fantastic. Another one of the three really of them chaps is Joe McGonigal. He runs a site called Ufology in UK. Again, I've met Joe a lot of time. I've worked with Joe. I've done the Skywatches with him. Decently nice fella, really nice bloke. I think I'd class Joe more of a UFO historian and UFO researcher than a nuts and bolts case lookerer. He doesn't do the investigations and such like we does, but the work that Joe does again is very important. We're lucky over here to have Larry Warren living over here. He's not so much doing the UFO stuff, but Larry still does all the UFO conferences and paranormal conferences, and he actually got married a couple of years ago to a friend of mine from Liverpool. So I've met again Larry a number of occasions. Larry's tale about Rendlesham Forest, precise as it was to how it is now, is another matter, but Larry certainly witnessed certain events.
So you think, because Warren's tale, I met Larry at the Stuart Miller's conference where I met you. In fact,
yep.
I interviewed him. I met him subsequently a year or two later at the Barmpot conference that is the International UFO Congress and Film Festival. Mm-hmm. And Nick Pope was there too, and Robbie Williams, British pop star, came in. And here, the crazy thing is, if you were in the UK, everyone would be going gaga over Williams, but Robbie Williams flew his private jet in to Laughlin, Nevada, basically to come to the UFO conference and meet Nick Pope. So It was a reversal of celebrity. It was probably the only place in the world where Nick Pope was more famous than Robbie Williams.
Yeah, Robbie Williams is into ghosts now.
Oh, well, there you go. I remember at one point he said he was giving up his pop career to become a UFO researcher. So I thought, you'll fit in well with a certain type of UFO researcher.
He's actually from Burslem, which is not 5 miles from where I live in Congleton. So we sent a letter to his publicist to invite him along to instruct him properly in the manner of paranormal and UFO investigation, but never got back to him.
Didn't show up. So, but what do you think of Larry Warren's story, though? Because it is controversial. Some people think he's completely full of it. Some people think something happened to him, but maybe not what he thinks happened to him. Other people think that, yes, Larry Warren is telling pretty much the absolute truth, and of course, it's all factual. So where do you know the story. What do you think of Larry?
Yeah, again, I met Larry back in 1998. There was supposed to be a guest speaker at an event that I was a member of the group at the time, and the person didn't turn up, but it just so happened that some members from a Liverpool group came over to see the lecturer. So Larry basically gave his talk, nothing down to it. We just sat and asked, and I was absolutely engrossed in his tale. I knew of it, but this was Larry Warren. This was the alleged principal witness to his case. Again, I've got his book in front of me, Left at Eastgate, that he wrote with Peter Robbins. It's a fantastic book. It's difficult, being the person I am, being of the manner of which I do things, and the way I see things and the way I hear things, and twist them round in my head and come out with different perceptions and such like. Larry, to me, is totally honest. There may be a little bit of addition, because some stories won't sell with a bit of addition. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not calling him a liar, but maybe he's confused in some senses. And I've got the utmost respect. Larry Warren is, some of the people he spent time with, Stevie Vai and what have you, Larry Warren to me is a legend and a thoroughly nice bloke. I'm just not 100% convinced that the events that allegedly took place at Rendlesham Forest are as accurate as Larry's story. And don't get me wrong, I'm not calling him a liar, but let me say Larry's belief of the events that took place sounds better.
Right.
He's got a belief of what took place, and there's another event. There's something. It's a confusing case. I mean, me and Steve, we done another TV program last year, and we stayed in a hotel in Solihull. We shared a room, and some of the things that me and Steve were discussing. Steve is 100% convinced that something of consequence, and he doesn't know what took place at Rendlesham Forest. Where I am under belief that something took place, but I think it's a lot more mundane than people would try to make out. And again, the Rendlesham Forest incident has made a lot of people, Jenny Randalls, Larry Warren, Peter Robbins, Philip Mann, a lot of people have come out with books and this, that and the other regarding the site. So again, it's another money-making scheme. So anything can happen. A lot of people come and make monies here, there and everywhere. But I believe something took place. I just think it's a lot less mundane than what actually took place. And again, kudos to Larry. He's one of the nicest blokes I've met in my involvement in the subject, full stop.
I'm going to try and help you out here because I don't think you mean money-making scheme, which makes it sound like everybody cooked it up so they can make money.
Oh, no.
It's an opportunity. It's a real case.
Yeah, an opportunity, yeah.
But it's like Roswell. Out of reporting it, yes, people will write books and make money about it. So I just want to make sure nobody says, oh, my God, Dave Sadler, accused all these people of creating Rendlesham so that they could make money. Peter Robbins, I'm sure, didn't even know where Rendlesham Forest was until after.
Yeah.
Many years after.
Well, I don't know. Some people have done that. I know there's a case in the UK that was created specifically for money making. I know it never took place, and I've actually seen the person who manufactured the case. He was able to get hold of old paper from that period of time, and he done his research brilliantly, and wrote a letter in the guise of a clergyman reporting certain things. So I know that these things do take place. So, but obviously Rendlesham's a different matter because there was so many military people who witnessed the something.
So this fraud that you were talking about, now you just can't bring that up, Dave, and not tell us more about it. Is this a publicly known case, or is this something that in your private files?
No, it is a public known case in the UK. A person that I know very well manufactured the case. Originally, it was to wind up somebody else who lived nearby. There was a female ufologist at the time who was basically being pushed by the names to become the next big thing. She didn't have a clue, to be honest. She's not involved in the subject anymore, but she was pushed by the well-known people because she was a female. And the ufology is filled with men who don't take females seriously. Myself, I'm totally the opposite, by the way, because, I know a lot of good female ufologists, Judith Jafar, Kirsty Raven, they're all good British ufologists. But this person was being pushed by the old UFO magazines to be in a position of something of consequence. So the person I know decided to manufacture a hoax case and put it back in history, and he got everything spot on. The case, there was meteor showers sighted on the night of the event. He even found out, as I said, the paper and such like to manufacture old records to send them to the investigator, and this did become quite a well-known case. If you mention it in the UK, most people will know of it. And I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm not going to name it because the person who created it would be known straight away, basically. And I'm not going to take that away from him.
So it's a case that, from what I'm getting from you, is reasonably well known over there, that a lot of people would still think is a real case.
Yes.
But insiders know it's a complete hoax.
Yes, I've actually got a taped conversation on a mini cassette from the time that was sent to me back in about the year 2000 with the investigator, the female investigator, and the hoaxer having a conversation. And I tell you what, he should be a ventriloquist or something. His accent's absolutely fantastic. He puts on a different accent. And the whole conversation is about this location and his events that he witnessed. And all this appeared not long later in different media outlets.
Without asking you, I mean, if I was a real journalist, I'd be pushing you right now to name names, Dave. We need names.
But I'm Dave Sadler. I wouldn't tell you.
Yeah. Well, then I'm not a real I'm not a real journalist either. So So I'll let that go. You know what? And I like a good mystery too. So you tell me after we're recording, and then let me in the inner circle. But I like people to sort of go, oh crap, which case is that now? And folks, if you're clever, you can probably figure it out, I suppose, on your own. But what do you think of the whole idea of hoaxing a UFO case? I know people who've done it to make a point, which is what it sounds like was going on here, to make the point that this person that was being pushed forward was completely unqualified to do anything.
Yeah.
But other people I know that have done it have done it for fun, just to have a few giggles. Other people have done it to make the point that, look, these things can be done, so that we have to be aware that a lot, if not a lot, at least some UFO cases are probably going to be hoaxes. This Jerusalem case is absolutely one of those. Mm-hmm. And what do you think of that? Do you think that, maybe everybody who is a UFO researcher should hoax at least one UFO case in their career just to show everybody else how it can be done and sort of serve as a warning? Is this a good thing? Because I know Andy Roberts has done it too, or at least people over here keep saying he's hoaxed something.
So is Dave Sadler. And when I finally write the UFO book that I've been promising to do as the follow-up to the paranormal book that I did, which, by the way, isn't, hey, look at me, buy my book, don't, it's crap. The second book I'm going to do is UFO reality, and the last chapter will be the coming out of the closet of that little hoax,
nice.
Which has appeared on TV on numerous occasions and throughout the internet and such like. So that will come to fruition one day. But anyway, yeah. That again was done for a point. That was done to make it. I've done certain things in the past. We were going through a process where everybody in the UK decided they were a demonologist. So to make it a point, I set up a website, something like ukexorcist.co.uk. I can't remember exactly what it was. Put a load of information up there. Found the Roman Catholic Church rites of ritual, and ordained myself as a priest on the website, so I became a fully fledged exorcist in about 10 minutes. So that just shows you what the ability of certain things to do. But back to the hoaxing anyway, yeah. It's a pain in the arse. It's a complete pain in the arse, because the amount of photographs we receive or video footage we receive from people which is hoaxed is untrue. As I said in the media, the things that Nick Pope keeps commenting on, saying, oh, that's the best British blah, blah, blah you've ever seen. These things that people are sending them through, they send them to the Sun, they're going to get paid £250 off the Sun. It's, again, let's create a UFO and put it in there. It's a complete pain in the arse, but at the same time, it's something that comes as part of the deal, really. Somebody's always going to try trying to trick you. There's people out there, I know in the paranormal world, who will create a phantom, a ghost, a paranormal event, and get somebody else to report it to you, or send it via a different web email address, just to try and trip you up, just to try and say, ha, they're not all they think they are. That person's not all they think they are. That happens with the UFO hoax. It's a complete pain in the bottom. And again, I can't be dealing with this whole way of making money thing. If you're going to make money, make it properly. Tell the truth, be honest. Don't go with the bull crap. It's, and this whole hoaxing, it's part and part of the deal, but at the end of the day, I can't be bothered with it.
Well, so a hoax to make money, and with the Majestic 12 documents, which I'm convinced were a hoax, people always say, well, what's the end game? Two things. It was almost 30 years ago. So why has nobody come forward to reveal that it was a hoax? And nobody really made any money off it. At least people that would have been involved in the hoaxing didn't really make any. Other people have. But that's been sort of, kind of an end result but the hoaxers didn't. And I always say two things. One, the best part of a hoax is not telling anyone, is watching it metastasize.
It's having the knowledge that you've tricked people.
Yeah. And so
it's like me, with what I've done a hoax. I'll admit it, but I'm not going to get there just yet. It's not a major one. It's nothing major. It's nothing that'll be all in the public domain and such like. It's just something nice and simple that was created just to show that it can be done. And that's the reason I've done it, was to show it could be done. To show that after 7 or 8 years, people will still say, oh yeah, I remember that. And I've always said to people in the inner sanctum that I'll be honest, if anybody says to me, is that a hoax? I'll say, yes, it is. Nice one. But, I'm not lying. I'm just showing that it can be done, how easy it is to create a paper trail. And come up with the photograph, the exceptional photograph, or the fantastic piece of footage. And today's day and age, Paul, as we've seen with this Jerusalem UFO, it's so easy for people to do with digital cameras, with iPhones. I mean, we've got things on an iPhone where you can take a photograph and you can put a perfect UFO in the background and it'll look perfect. The same with the Ghost. They've been all through the UK where bloody Anakin Skywalker in The Phantom Menace is appearing in fields outside bloody Salisbury. It's so easy to do. It's so easy for people to create. Much more easier. We were looking at images the other night. Can't remember, but they were 1950s images, and you could actually see by looking at the telephone wires a little bit crooked, just the slightest bit crooked, where you could see there was another piece of wire hanging from it. They were done for different reasons in them days than they are today, but to be able to create a hoax now is so simple compared to how it was 5, 10, 15 years ago, because of digital technology, because of Photoshop, because of the high level of programs that are available on the computer.
This past Monday, I was at an all-day and all-evening symposium put on by Telefilm Canada, which is our federal film funding agency. I know you have a similar agency in the United Kingdom. And it was on, they've been doing it across the country for filmmakers. It was on internet, distribution, marketing, and film financing. So basically how the new media is changing my business, how you can raise money, how you can distribute yourself, all sorts of great stuff. And they had one example of a do-it-yourself, very independent film that was out of Europe. And they said, look, these guys, it was a science fiction kind of thing. And these guys went to all the subgroups, forums, chat rooms, sci-fi fan websites, everywhere. And they just, sort of put stuff out there, found their target market, listened in on what people were saying, so that they could understand how better to craft their story. And more importantly, their marketing campaign. And I know I was the only guy in the room who understood this when he saw it. But they put a slide up, and there it was. There were all the things on this timeline listed, all the places these guys had gone. And one of them was Above Top Secret, which I think most people in the paranormal world would know is, if not the biggest, it's one of the biggest paranormal news sites, chat forums, thousands upon thousands of members, I'm sure. These guys, these filmmakers, had amongst all these other non-paranormal sites. Above Top Secret, their logo was actually there. And, they went there to find out what people were talking about and how they could be manipulated from a marketing campaign. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's what guys like me do for a living, Marketing is part of my business, so that's fine. But I just thought it interesting. If you're on a paranormal website or a chat forum or whatever, be aware that guys like me are coming by to find out what you're talking about and what interests you, and what's the best way that maybe we can do something that will really get you wound up in terms of a marketing campaign. So somewhere there's a thread on the ATS where they're, mining you for data and ideas too. So changing gears totally, because, we'll wrap this up here in a couple of minutes. But a couple of things I want to talk to you about. Berwyn Mountain. Give us on in Canada and the United States the lowdown on Berwyn Mountain. What's the story, and is it real? Is it a crashed alien spacecraft, or as it's often portrayed to be, or what really went on there?
The Berwyn Mountain UFO crash is very interesting. It happened in 1974 in Caer Branwen, which is in North Wales, near to Llandrailo. And for the Welsh people who do possibly listen, I apologise for my pronunciation. There was an earth tremor recorded, there was fireballs in the sky witnessed, and these are witnessed and recorded on the British Geological Survey. The information is readily available to find. These events did take place. Something crashed into the mountainside at the Berwyn Mountains. Dozens of witnesses, as I say, police phone calls from everywhere. And allegedly, and we're going to be using the terms allegedly quite a lot here, allegedly all sorts of military personnel converged on the site. Stories were suggested here and there, lights were seen out on the mountainside, and allegedly a UFO crashed. That's the alleged incident, the Berwyn UFO incident. Very, very interesting. I mean, 1974 was the year of my birth, so I can't comment from being around at the time or seeing the newspapers. I can only report from the information that's become available to me and the books that I've read and the people I've interviewed and spoke to throughout the years. But from my point of view, the information that came to me, I spoke to a chap who he was a chef, if I remember correctly, an RAF chef at RAF Valley. That's where currently Prince William's stationed. They do the mountain rescue and such like there, and all the training for the certain aircrafts. Now, this gentleman, in his spare time, decided he wanted to do something else, so he joined the mountain rescue. He went out on site the night this event took place. But the story that he told me, that there were some live exercises taking place, again, this is true. The British Air Force and Navy and such like were doing some live testing out in the Irish Sea, like war games. Other people will suggest different things took place. Other people will suggest that other military testing was taking place. But in effect, a Hawk training aircraft, I was told by this gentleman from the Mountain Rescue Team, flew over that area and inadvertently dropped a live Sparrow missile. The missile impacted on the side of the mountain, leaving a crater, etc., etc., which is why everybody saw something streaking through the sky, why this was felt on the earthquake detecting machines at the British Geographical Survey, why all these events came into place. But which would be better for you? Would it be better to know that the British military are firing live rounds on their people, or let the UFO believers jump into place and say it was a UFO that crashed? I think they'd probably, the military, let's suggest, would say let's leave it to the believers and let them come up with their own story, so people don't realise we're firing live rounds. That's my belief. That's the story I've been told, and I've found a lot of information that would suggest otherwise. Similar. Andy Roberts, again, he's been a lot more in depth. Again, he wasn't involved initially. He came onto it years later. His book talks all about it. If anybody wants to find out about the Berwyn Mountain crash, and what I think is the best book for it would be, and hey, look at me selling Andy Roberts' book, which is called UFO Down, the Berwyn Mountain UFO Crash, available on Amazon in the UK. That's. I wonder if I'll get royalties for that, by the way.
I suspect not.
So, yeah. It's an event that took place where allegedly a UFO crashed into the side of the mountainside in 1974. It's still going on today. It's back in the news lately. It was in the one of the national newspapers a couple of weeks ago, and it's one of those long-running things that, again, it's probably something a little less mundane, a little more mundane, and a little less exciting than what people claim it to be. But the thing is, there's several British UFO researchers who claim to have metal from the site, metal that they've had tested, and they can't come up with what it is. I'm an engineer. I've got links to all sorts of metallurgists, and I can get it tested quite quickly to find out what it is. And not one of these people will offer the, let's call it shrapnel, in any way, shape, or form, even if it's the slightest sliver or filing to be tested.
There's so many of these things going around that it's absolutely no wonder that people don't take the subject of UFOs seriously. And I always differentiate between the serious study of the UFO phenomenon, which by and large takes place away from the public eye. Jacques Vallée called it the invisible college. But, people do their work and they don't plaster it all over message boards and stuff like that for anonymous people to yabber on about it. And then there's ufology, which is the message boards with anonymous people yabbering on about it. And they're two totally different things. And the nice thing about you is, and you guys, you're part of the former. You're that group that goes out and does real investigations into UFOs and the paranormal and everything. And until you're finished, you can go to your website and you can see reports and stuff. But until you're done, you don't go to Above Top Secret or any of these other places and go, hey, guess what's going on, Here's a minute-by-minute blow of this crazy case. And yet, if you did that, you could probably make a fair bit of money.
Probably.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm not that way inclined.
So thanks. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Dave. And I hope to be over in the United Kingdom. I say this every year, but this year, again, I hope to be over. And if I am, I will spend a few days in Congleton and nearabouts. Because it's actually, I love Manchester and I love that area. So, but you guys do great work. Folks, their website is www.upia.co.uk. I'll post that on the blog and on my podcast as well. And Phenomena Magazine. You go to the website, you can subscribe. It's free. As Dave said, if you don't like it, don't read it. but at least have a look. Let it show up in your inbox and take a look. There's some good stuff in there. So,
well, it's actually downloadable. All back 22 issues are all available online now, so you just click on the image on the download page and it'll download straight as a PDF to your PC, so even easier.
Check the issue on Ghost Cases, and you can see the photos, and you'll see why Holly Stevens will become a star, and I will stay a director behind the camera from here on in. So thanks very much, Dave. It's always a pleasure.
You're more than welcome.
Let's do it again.
And thank you to anybody who listens, and I hope you can understand the accent.
Oh, no, I think the accent's fine. It's what you're saying that they might have trouble understanding. But if they think about it, they'll understand that most of what you're saying, I think, is stuff that people need to hear, and that we need to reorientate our way that we look at paranormal investigation, and I include UFOs in there, and it needs to be done the way you guys are doing it over at the UPIA in England. So kudos to you guys.
Take care, Paul.
All right, Dave. Good talking to you.
You too.